I've never been the nosy type. To me, trust is the foundation. It's not some privilege that needs constant surveillance. But that morning, when I opened my wife's iPad just to check our shared meeting calendar, a routine work thing, I saw a message pop up. It wasn't the sender's name that made me freeze, it was the message itself. If he collapses during the meeting, everything will be ours. I reread it, again and again, like my brain was trying to reject what my eyes had just seen. It was from Nathan Croft, the same guy my wife, Sabrina, introduced as a strategic investor, a promising connection, the key to scaling up our next funding round. That's what she said when she brought him into the company I co-founded. I glanced at the kitchen counter. The coffee machine was still letting off steam. 2 white ceramic mugs sat side by side, one for her, one for me, just like every morning for years. Only this time, she made the coffee. And when she called me over to fuel up before your big meeting, I caught that look in her eyes. So soft it felt out of place, like she was saying goodbye without saying a word. I sat down, wrapped my fingers around the mug, but didn't take a sip. My mind was stuck on that message. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I was just clear. She thought I'd go down during the investor board meeting, that if I spaced out even for a few minutes, she and her lover could take over everything. But there was one thing she forgot. I'm the one who wrote the entire technical proposal she's about to present. And I'm also the kind of guy who never lets someone else pour the coffee without knowing exactly which cup is mine. If you've ever been through something similar, or know someone who has, I hope you'll stay and listen. And if you feel like it, a like or a quick comment would mean a lot. I met Sabrina when I was 29, still freelancing code out of a crappy little coffee shop in Austin. She was there to meet a real estate client, but somehow we ended up talking because of a spreadsheet UI I was designing. She looked at my screen and said, "Do you realize you just made dry data look sexy?" I laughed. Wasn't used to compliments like that. But from that day on, we couldn't stop talking. 3 months later, we were living together. 7 months after that, we launched a company, Altix Dynamics, her name idea. I was just focused on keeping the system running without crashing. She had the vision from day one. We built everything together, raising funds, hiring, pitching to our first clients. She was the voice. I was the structure. She made the promises. I made them real. Sounds cliche, I know. But back then, it really felt like a shared dream. I still remember those 2 a.m. nights in a cheap rental office, eating cup noodles while checking the traffic dashboard. Or that time she lost her voice before a big demo, and I had to present for her, hands shaking like hell. We pulled through so many almost dead moments like that. 5 years in, Altix was stable. We had a proper dev team, a full-on marketing department, and had closed a solid seed round. I started stepping back into the shadows a bit more, doing what I did best, building the back end, designing the systems that everyone else would sell. And her? She shined. Sabrina always knew how to say exactly what people wanted to hear. She could take a vague idea and make it sound like $1 million pitch. Clients adored her. Investors, well, they admired her a bit more than was strictly professional. I used to think that was a strength. Until the late work sessions started becoming a regular thing. Enter Nathan Croft, the angel investor and growth advisor. She said, "He's been a huge help. I just don't want you stressing about fundraising anymore." I didn't argue. I was tired. After nearly a decade of grinding in startup mode, I welcomed the breather. But then I noticed I was no longer CC'd on the fundraising emails. Nobody asked for my input on the new pitch deck. I went from being Lucas, the guy who built everything you're seeing, to Lucas, the technical co-founder, the sidekick title in every intro. I told myself I was just being overly sensitive, that Sabrina was just doing what she had to do to scale the company, that I shouldn't read too much into her late nights. I used to do the same, until I saw that message this morning. That message came in on a Tuesday morning. The big investor board meeting was scheduled for Friday. I don't know why Sabrina didn't delete the text. Maybe she thought I'd never check her iPad. Maybe she was too confident. 10 years together, and I'd never once given her a reason to think I'd suspect anything. But when I scrolled up a few more lines, the cold feeling in my chest turned from shock to clarity. Sharp, surgical clarity. As long as he's a little out of it, I'll take over the whole presentation. You handle the paperwork for me. Attached below was a screenshot of the edited pitch deck. My name, Lucas Grant, co-founder, had been pushed down to the bottom, shrunk to near invisible under lead strategy, Sabrina Cole. There was also a file titled Board Restructure Proposal. I kept reading. Another message from Nathan Croft, sent at 11:32 p.m. the night before. Just dose it right. Doesn't have to be strong. Just enough to make him ramble, so the board loses confidence. Or Sabrina had already negotiated everything, including my role in the company I built. Then came the last message, time-stamped just before midnight, and that one sealed it. Don't worry, I'll do it like always. His coffee? I've got it. I don't know how long I stood there. All I remember is that I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every emoji, every file, every timestamp. Then I sent them to a private, encrypted inbox only I could access. Two-factor authentication. No sync to any cloud. The next morning, when Sabrina left early for her yoga class, I stayed behind, and I set up a camera. A mini GoPro hidden on the upper kitchen cabinet, pointed straight down at the counter and coffee machine, wide enough to catch every movement, especially her hands. It recorded to a micro SD card, auto-starting every morning from 7 to 10 a.m. That same day, I called Carla Jennings, my personal attorney, and asked for an urgent meeting that afternoon. I'd worked with Carla on a few small M&A deals. She was the first person I thought of when I realized this was spiraling into something dangerous. We met at her office, 15th floor, gray stone building in downtown Portland. Frosted glass windows, a little coffee machine in the corner. As always, Carla didn't waste time. She pulled out a chair, opened her laptop, and said, "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." So I did. I told her about the texts between Sabrina and Nathan, the edited slides, the not-so-subtle hint that she planned to spike my coffee before the board meeting. I handed her my phone and let her scroll through the screenshots. She didn't say a word while reading. Once I was done, she flipped open a notebook and started writing. "She's trying to remove you from the company by manufacturing a loss of confidence from the board, correct?" I nodded. "And you have proof she may be planning to drug you. Light neurological interference?" "I'm setting up a video. Just installed the camera this morning. It covers the kitchen, exactly where she prepares the coffee." Carla scribbled a few more notes, then looked up. Her voice was calm, even, deliberate. "All right. Here's what I want you to do in the next 48 hours. First, she'd draft a financial separation agreement that clearly outlined my original capital investment and every technical contribution I'd made. Second, she'd prepare an internal fraud report template, just in case they tried to move fast during the board meeting. Third, I'd sign an IP protection authorization to block any restructuring attempts that excluded me. And finally, Carla would advise on how to discreetly approach certain board members, to make sure at least one of them knew what was really happening. "You don't need to act first," Carla said, still calm. "Let them think they're in control. But every move you make from now on needs to leave a trace, clear, legal, and slow." I stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, "But what if they really try to drug me? What if this goes beyond a hostile takeover into character assassination?" Carla nodded. "Even better. If we catch that on camera, we go civil and criminal. Fraud, poisoning, malicious defamation. That's 3 charges. If you get footage of her preparing the coffee, and if we can prove there's anything in it that impairs cognitive function, Sabrina and Nathan won't just be out of the company. They'll be out of the industry. Period." I exhaled. The weight in my chest eased just a bit. Then, for the first time in that meeting, Carla smiled. "Don't worry. I've handled CEOs and their arm candy lovers before. Sabrina and Nathan, they're amateurs. You just stay sharp. I'll handle the rest." Friday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I was nervous, because I needed a few quiet minutes to prepare the final cup of coffee. Sabrina was still in the shower. I headed down to the kitchen first, carefully pulling two identical mugs from the top cabinet, white ceramic, company logo printed on the side. I took a black Sharpie and marked a tiny dash, barely a comma, right above the handle of one mug. Small enough to be invisible, but clear enough for the camera to catch which one was marked. When Sabrina walked into the kitchen, her hair still damp, she smiled and said, "Let me make the coffee today. You'll need to stay sharp." I nodded and took a seat on the couch across from the kitchen, pretending to go over documents one last time. But really, my eyes were on my phone, watching the live feed from the camera. The screen showed her moving like she always did. She filled the machine with grounds, added water, and flipped the switch. As the coffee poured into both mugs, she pulled a small vial from her pocket. Quick and smooth, she added a few drops into one of the mugs, the one without the Sharpie mark. The other mug? She didn't touch it at all. Everything was in the frame. Every movement in full HD, auto-uploading to a secure drive she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, Sabrina walked over with both cups and placed them on the glass coffee table. She handed me the one without the mark, the drugged one. I smiled slightly, glanced down at the handle, and confirmed the Sharpie was still in place. "Just leave it there," I said casually. "I'll drink it in a bit, just finishing up the cost breakdown for today's presentation." She nodded and was about to sit next to me when I added, "Oh, do we still have some of that apple pie from yesterday? Suddenly got a craving." She laughed, light and unbothered, and headed back into the kitchen. "Hang on, I'll grab it." As soon as she disappeared from view, I swapped the cups. Fast. Clean. The drugged coffee was now sitting neatly in front of her seat. My marked mug was back where it belonged, near my right hand. No spills, no noise, no trace. Sabrina returned a moment later with a small plate of pie and set it on the table. I picked up the mug with the Sharpie mark and took a sip. "Tastes a little different today, but not bad," I said, voice calm. Not a compliment, not a complaint, just a neutral observation. She paused for half a second, then smiled again. "I switched to a new blend. It's stronger. I thought you'd need it today." I nodded and said nothing more. She picked up the other mug, the one she had meant for me, and took a long sip. I watched. No blinking, no rush. Her plan had worked flawlessly. She just didn't realize the target had changed. The meeting started at 10 a.m. sharp, just as scheduled with Avenor Capital. The investor group from San Francisco, Sabrina, always called our golden gateway to the next scale-up round. She was the one to kick things off, like always. Same confident tone, same poised presence, eyes locked on the camera. But 5 minutes in, I started noticing the rhythm was off. When she got to the cost modeling section, she repeated a number twice. At first, I thought it was just a slip. The second time, she kept clearing her throat, dry, rasping, like no amount of water could soothe it. The third time, she paused unexpectedly and asked for just a minute to get some water, something she'd never done in any pitch we'd given. I didn't say a word, just calmly clicked to the next slide and spoke in an even low tone. "I'll cover the next section while Sabrina takes a quick break. This is a performance comparison between the last 2 quarters." The 3 Avenor reps leaned in and started taking notes. No one asked to pause. No one questioned why I'd taken over. I went straight into the data, straight to the insight. I pointed out 3 specific bottlenecks, ones they had flagged themselves in last week's discovery call. No fluff, no fancy buildup. 1 issue per slide, 1 clear takeaway per point. I'd prepped this section all week, but today, this was the first time I felt like I truly owned it. Sabrina came back a few minutes later, a glass of water in her hand, lips pale, eyes losing focus. She sat quietly. Didn't interrupt again. From where I sat, I could see it. She was slowing down. Her gaze didn't follow the slides anymore. Her head tilted slightly, the kind of unfocused nod she did when zoning out. The stuff in the coffee was doing exactly what it was meant to do. The Avenor team began their questions. They dove deep. Workflow design, implementation timeline, operational feasibility. Normally, those questions would have been for Sabrina. She used to lead these meetings. But she said nothing. She just sat there, pale, disconnected, and silent. I didn't turn to her. I didn't need to. She wasn't in charge anymore. And the people on the other side of the screen, they were beginning to realize that too. That evening, as I was tidying up my office, Sabrina walked in, still holding her glass of water. She looked at me for a moment, then said, half joking, half serious, "Did your coffee this morning taste weird?" I looked up, calm. "Nope. Thought it was pretty good, actually. I felt more focused than usual, if anything." "Why? You think something was wrong with it?" She hesitated for just a second, long enough for me to catch the flicker of confusion in her eyes. Then she smiled and said, No. Maybe I just brewed it a little too strong." I nodded, pretending not to notice a thing. I liked it. There's something about that new flavor, bold but smooth. You should make it that way again. She smiled, nodded, then turned to leave, too. But her steps slowed, just slightly. And I knew, without either of us saying it, that her mind was already racing with questions, the kind that don't have comforting answers. The day after the meeting, I sent a short email to our contact at Avenor Capital. No dramatic explanations, no finger-pointing, just a formal notice that I was initiating an internal restructuring process and would soon be officially parting ways with my co-founder, Sabrina, due to serious signs of personal conflict of interest that were beginning to affect the company's strategic direction. I also attached a brief summary of my professional role and a list of the strategic initiatives I had personally led over the last 3 years. No need to spell things out. The people who sat across from me during that morning's meeting, they were sharp enough to read between the lines. That evening, I met with Carla again, my attorney. I laid out everything I had prepared over the past week. Screenshots of the messages between Sabrina and her so-called strategic investor, clearly outlining their plan to push me out of the company. A clip from the kitchen camera showing Sabrina adding drops to my coffee, and audio recordings from 3 recent meetings where Sabrina intentionally cut me off, inserting decisions without internal votes or alignment. Carla went through each document in silence, jotting down notes. At the end of the session, she said just one thing. "We've got enough to go to court if it comes to that. But if you'd rather keep this clean, I can help you make it fast and quiet." I nodded. I didn't want a scandal. I wanted control. And to walk away with my name intact. Over the next 3 days, I quietly transferred ownership of all intellectual property, the frameworks, the ops processes, the entire data analysis system, to a private LLC I'd registered a month ago. A contingency plan I once thought was overkill. Turned out, it was the perfect insurance. I also filed a request with the bank to freeze all company accounts showing irregular activity, especially the discretionary fund Sabrina used for investor meetings. At the same time, I asked our internal auditor to track every undocumented expense from the last 6 months. A few names surfaced. A few numbers didn't line up. Layer by layer, the cover peeled back. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I just felt lighter. Sabrina still had no clue. She thought everything was still within her grasp. She still smiled over dinner and talked about the deal with Avenor like it was already closed. And I still nodded, still listened, still took notes. But what I was preparing wasn't revenge. It was a purge. And that meeting? That was just step 1. A week later, my lawyer called and said something I'll never forget. "It's time you take back what was always yours." Her voice was calm, but it landed like a deadbolt clicking shut. The morning after that call, I handed Sabrina a sealed envelope. I placed it neatly on the dining table. She'd just stepped out of the kitchen, hair still damp from a shower, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's this?" she asked, half confused, half wary. I set my tea down and looked her straight in the eye. "A summary of everything you tried to do to me, along with a few account statements, transfer records, and login histories from Lucas's device." She opened the envelope slowly, and for the first time in years, Sabrina's hands, usually so steady, trembled just a little. And then her face drained of color. Not because of one thing, because of everything. The screenshots of her messages with Lucas were there. The high-res video of her pouring something into my coffee cup. Even a draft of the fake equity transfer agreement. bearing a forged version of my signature. "You set me up?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. I shrugged. "No, I just prepared for the day you decided you didn't want to walk beside me anymore." No tears. No apologies. Sabrina just stood there, eyes scanning the papers like she was searching for a crack, any crack to crawl through. But there were none left. "What are you going to do with all of this?" I stood up, walked calmly to the cabinet, and pulled out one more folder, this one with a red cover. The divorce papers, already signed. I looked her in the eye one last time. "Nothing if you walk away from the company. Quietly. No lawsuits, no public drama. You take your path, and I'll continue building mine." She didn't reply, but she didn't say no. I don't know what Sabrina told Nathan after that day, but the next morning, she emailed her resignation, citing health reasons. No further explanation. A few weeks later, a friend in the investment world forwarded me a copy of an internal memo. Nathan had been suspended from Norvest Capital, pending an internal investigation for non-transparent influence in an active deal. The rumor spread fast. Nathan had used personal leverage to push a deal involving our company, while also being romantically involved with a co-founder. In this industry, you don't get to play both sides and walk away clean. Another firm he was tied to, Maven Circle, swiftly removed him from their advisory board. As for Sabrina, she was pulled from the speaker lineup at a major startup conference. The reason listed was brief but brutal: undisclosed conflict of interest. I heard they had a massive blow-up in an internal meeting. Lucas blamed Sabrina for botching the pitch. Sabrina snapped back, accusing him of gambling too early and betting on the wrong guy. In the end, they broke up not long after. No one in this circle wants to deal with someone who tried to hijack a startup through manipulation. And no one's going to trust a co-founder who once drugged her own husband just to take over a presentation. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, smaller than our old headquarters but brighter and quieter. My new company, Arcton Analytics, had just secured a long-term contract with Avenor Capital. No middleman, no Sabrina pulling strings. They chose me because of what they saw that day in the boardroom. I never made a public statement about the divorce, didn't post anything online. But this industry, it's small, and word travels faster than a quarterly report, especially when the so-called strategic investor, Sabrina's lover, was booted from 2 of the funds where he used to hold equity. The reason? Lack of transparency during startup evaluations and personal conduct that damaged the ecosystem's reputation. As for Sabrina, the last I heard, she was trying to launch something new in another city. But with an active civil suit over a forged signature and unauthorized fund withdrawals, her chances were close to zero, and the lawsuit didn't even come from me. It was from the shareholders who once trusted her. She used to be the brightest voice in every meeting, the one I always stood behind, supporting every pitch from the shadows. Maybe that's why she thought I didn't know, didn't see, wasn't capable of pushing back. But the truth is, I saw everything. And instead of screaming, I took the long way around. That coffee mug from that morning, I still have it. The little Sharpie mark on the handle is still there, just a small reminder. But heavy enough. Never betray the trust of someone who stays quiet. Thank you for spending your time here. If this story spoke to you, feel free to like, subscribe, or share a few thoughts in the comments. I'm always grateful for the company.